Hello folks, welcome back to the Wikipedia world, and I am Abhinay Gupta. So in the previous lecture we had freshly started with a new topic, which is the winding up of the companies. Right? And we know that the provisions of this chapter will be covered from our previous Companies Act. To be very specific, Part 7 of the Companies Act 1956. As per the guidance of the Institute, you will be asked questions with reference to the previous Companies Act in at least your May 2016 examination. Right? Likewise, we have also seen in the case of the producer company, right? Part 9A of the Companies Act 1956 would still continue to cover the provisions of a producer company. Right? And similarly will be the provisions in winding up. So in the first lecture, the introductory lecture, we have understood the meaning of the terminology. Right? What is it? What is winding up? What is dissolution? And what is insolvency? Because most of you might be confused between the difference of winding up and dissolution. Right? Most of us basically generally consider that winding up and dissolution is all the same thing. The company comes to an end. Right? But that is not so. The basic difference is that the winding up is the process and dissolution is the conclusion. Winding up is the journey and dissolution is the destination. Right? And difference between winding up and insolvency is that the winding up is attracted towards companies and insolvency is attracted towards a member. Right? Other distinctions we have seen in detail in the previous lecture. So if somebody has missed it, you can please go back and refer to that. So that the concept of winding up, dissolution, liquidation, insolvency is clear in your mind, because that base is needed to understand the chapter ahead. Right? So we'll start with the discussion of section 425, the modes of winding up. We have discussed the three modes in the previous lecture as well, but now we would get into the details of them. So the first mode of winding up would be winding up via compulsory winding up, covered under section 433. That means winding up by the court. Right? Then we have voluntary winding up, covered under section 484 to 487. And that is divided into two parts. One is the members voluntary winding up and the other is the creditors voluntary winding up. And the members voluntary winding up would be covered under section 490 to 498, and from 499 to 509 we would consider, or we would refer to the provisions relating to the creditors voluntary winding up. And the last is the winding up subject to the supervision of the court. Right? And that is covered under section 522 to 527. Is that clear with you? So our basic chapter, the entire chapter of winding up, is largely divided into these three parts only. Apart from this, you will have like the meaning of contributories, right? What is defunct company? These are the other things that you will also study in this chapter, right? But largely the chapter is divided into these three categories, right? And anyways, this entire chapter covers provisions from sections ranging from 425 to 560 only, right? So to begin with, we'll pick up the first mode, which is the compulsory winding up, section 433. And this is going to be a lengthy topic and we will take a couple of lectures on this. Right? So to start with, section 433, the grounds of compulsory winding up. So basically, the compulsory winding up is categorized into 6 different categories. Right? Number 1 being a special resolution passed by the shareholders of the company. Yes, the shareholders, the members of the company, right? They can call for a compulsory winding up via a special resolution. So what happens is, first the board of directors, they decide that yes, we need to wind up the company, right? And then they call for a meeting of the shareholders, and then the shareholders again give their consent by passing a special resolution that yes, we would prefer the company to be wounded up. But this scenario is very rare to see in a company, right? Because the shareholders, they have two powers. Right? So we have seen that there are basically 3 modes of winding up. So first is the compulsory winding up, and second is voluntary winding up, whereby the members can also opt for voluntary winding up. So the members have 2 options. If they want to wind up their company, they can either go for the compulsory winding up, that is the route from the court. They would apply to the court bypassing a special resolution that we want the company to be wound up, and the court takes over the proceedings. Right? And the second thing is that they pass a resolution for voluntary winding up, whereby the control is in their hand. So basically, what do you think? Being a shareholder, what would you want? Would you want to give up the control to the court, or would you want the control in your hand? We have a simple answer for that. We would want the control in our hand. So that is why this is a very rare phenomena. So if the company themselves they want to wind up, they generally opt for a voluntary winding up, right? So what happens is that the court will not send an official liquidator in that case. They themselves will appoint the liquidator. They will have the control over the liquidator, right? The process would be cheaper for them. It would be cost effective, plus it would also be a speeder process, because they already know, the directors and the members, they know how the company is performing. They know what is the value of the asset, what is the value of the liability, who are the people whom we owe something, who are the contributories. They know everything, and they themselves are a part. For example, if we're talking about the contributories for winding up, then the shareholders, the members are the contributories, right? In case of a liquidator coming and asking them to contribute would be a task, but when they themselves decide how much to contribute, they can contribute very easily, right? So generally the members would prefer a voluntary winding up instead of going via the route of the court, right, where they lose the control. So that is one. Next is the default on filing statutory report or holding statutory meeting. Yes, this is a very serious issue, right? If the company defaults the statutory reports that has to be filed with the registrar, and also the statutory meeting that has to be conducted. We have seen in the chapter of board meeting also that the company has to conduct a minimum of 4 board meetings in the year, and the time lapse for that has also been mentioned, the AGM and stuff. So there are other very many statutory meetings that the company has to conduct, right, as per the Companies Act. But if the company is not conducting those statutory meetings, not depositing the statutory reports, then that could be a cause for compulsory winding up by the court. And generally this procedure is mandate for the public limited companies, and the provisions are contained in section 165, right? So if the company is not holding the statutory meeting that it was supposed to hold, the due date has lapsed, right? Now they want to make an application for for compulsory winding up. So what will they do is that they will have to wait for a period of 14 days from the last due date when the meeting was supposed to be held. Before that, they cannot pass an application for winding up. So if the statutory meeting is not held, right, the last due date, maybe if it is 1st October or consider 1st October, then the application could be made only after 14th October, and then the court would go ahead with the winding up. But even the court does not want a company to be wound up, because if the company is created by law, it has been created for a purpose. So even the court would want that for our economy also, that the company should continue, it should sustain. Because if a company is being wound up, it is not a gain basically, it is a loss. Loss for the creditors, loss for the contributories, loss for the members, loss for the directors. It is a loss overall. So even the court would generally prefer if there is a way out. So what it does, it sometimes relaxes the provision and asks them to conduct the meeting now if you haven't conducted it. They give them time to submit those reports, the statutory reports that they were supposed to submit if they have defaulted already, right? So even the court tries to apply these liberal procedures, but if it is not possible, or if they again default in that, then the court will have to commence with the compulsory winding up, right? Then we have the third ground, which is non-commencement or suspension of business. Now, if you have a company that has been incorporated, right, when is a company incorporated? It is incorporated for a purpose, it has an object, right? The article, it contains the various objects of the company, that yes, the company will be doing this, the company will be manufacturing this, the company will enter into this dimension, that division and everything, right? So what happens is the promoters, they promote the company, they get the members, they get some shares, they get some capital for the company, and they start a company, they commence a company. So they may have borrowed loan for the same. So do you think there is any reason for the company to be incorporated and not start its business for the next 1 year? No. If that was the case, you would have incorporated the company 1 year hence. Why do you incorporate it now? So if a company is being incorporated and is not operative for 1 entire year, and that can be a cause of compulsory winding up. The court can say, we don't want any company like this in the market, which is incorporated but not performing, which is not generating anything, which is not generating any revenue, which is not working. It is actually a defunct company. So we do not want such company in the ground, in the market, right? So they would go ahead with compulsory winding up of such companies. There are other companies who have commenced their business, but for the past 1 year they are doing nothing. Either their objects are over, or they don't want to continue, or they're not able to continue. So if they're not able to continue, or they don't want to continue, then they should be wound up. Right? There is no point hanging the company in the MCA portal that yes, this is the company. What will you do with that? If the companies are performing, it is better to wind up those companies. So if there is a suspension in the business, or there is a delay in commencement, both for a period of 1 year, then the company could be wound up by the court. But we need to understand this provision in a little detail, a little depth. So consider an example that a company XYZ Limited has 3 divisions, right? And the proportion is 40%, 40% and 20%. Now if that company XYZ Limited shuts down one of its division, will that call for a winding up? The answer is no. We are talking about the suspension of the entire business. That has to be clear with you. You may get a case study based question on that, right? Shutting down a particular division or discontinuing one of the business of the company. If the company is into this was a concept of division. Now if the company has 2 or 3 business and it shut down one of its business, that does not mean suspension of business. When we talk about suspension of business, we talk about the suspension of all the business of the company, right? That is when we will call for a winding up. If one of the business is suspended and the company is still continuing with 2 business, would you wind up the company? The answer is no, right? Second, now we talked about the concept that if the company does not commence its business, its operation for the period of 1 year, we would wind it up. Now there may be some genuine problem. There may be some issues due to which they are not able to, but they intend to, and they will definitely. If 12 months have passed and they are not able to commence, maybe after 14 months they will commence, and they have a foreseeable future for that, right? So if the company is able to sufficiently explain the delay for non-commencement, then that would not call for the compulsory winding up of the company, right? But if no satisfactory explanation is given, right, then the company would be wound up. No matter how many assets the company have with no liabilities or anything, that is irrelevant. The only point is that you should have started the business. If you haven't started, explain it. If you can't explain it, you will have to wind up, right? And in the case of suspension of business, there is one more point. First, we have seen that if it is suspension of any one of the business and the others continue, we won't wind up. But now suppose there is a situation that they have suspended the entire business, right? Now, is it a compulsion that it will be wound up? No. The court will first see, right, whether or not they have actually abandoned their object, the object for which the company was created. Maybe there is an issue, they are not able to continue, right, but they still intend to fulfill their object and they are working hard for that, and they have a progressive report that we are working towards that and we will soon be into operation, right? The court will want the shareholders to decide on this matter. So if the majority of the shareholders, they do not want the winding up, the court will not wind up that company because they are struggling to still survive, so they will be given a chance to survive, right? Next round, reduction in the number of members below statutory minimum, right? So what is the statutory minimum number of members? In the case of public company, you must have read it in your IPCC level. Yes, it is 7 members. So a public company should have a minimum of 7 members and a private company should have a minimum of 2 members. So if at any point of time the number of members for a public company falls below 7 or the number of members for the private company falls below 2, the company needs to be wound up, because below that minimum members, they cannot operate, right? So over here you don't have any exception or any case. It is a simple straightforward statement that if it falls below the statutory minimum, you will have to wind up the company, right? But that does not mean that if a public company had 7 members, one of them left the company and then they got a replacement, they have a other member, right? So for that short duration of time, if they do not have the member, the court will not come to wind up the company, right? It is only when the member has left and they are continuing with the minimum number of members, less than the minimum number of members, then it would call for a winding up, right? So the next ground would be if the company is unable to pay its debt. The company has incurred debt into the market and they are not in a position to pay it back. So the company should not continue. The creditors, right, or the people who are supposed to receive the amount from the company, they should be helped. So the company would be liquidated, the company would be wound up and dissolved, and those people who ought to receive some amount from the company, right, they would be given the realization amount, right? They would be helped from the realization amount. So the liquidator will go around with the process, right? But now there are certain situations where we would consider that yes, the company is unable to pay its debt. That has been actually defined by section 433, right? So we have basically three such conditions. One is neglect to pay a debt exceeding rupees 500. Why do we call it neglect? Because a debt of 500, and if it will not be in any scenario that the company does not have 500 rupees to pay off its creditors. If it is not paying it, that means they are neglecting it. So although the amount involved is very small, but the result would be devastating. The company could be wound up. Hence the court wants certain specific requirements that needs to be fulfilled. It says that if the company neglects to pay its debt for rupees 500, right, that means the creditor has approached the company to pay its debt of rupees 500 or above, and 3 weeks have lapsed and the company did not respond, the company did not pay the debt, then we would go for winding up. Because it's a very small amount, there is no reason for not paying it. That means they are neglecting it. It is hampering the creditors. The company is not ethically viable. Hence they need to be wound up, right? But now how do you prove? So the creditors will have to write a notice and sign on the notice, right, and then forward the notice to the company. And to get a proof that yes, the notice had been forwarded, they would have to send that notice via a registered post, right? And that notice has to be delivered to the registered office of the company, not anywhere else, so that they can prove that yes, I have sent the notice and they have received the notice and still they have taken no action. And the sign can be done by the creditor or even its legal representative, right? And one more fact, it is irrelevant whether the amount is payable to the creditor originally or some other creditor has assigned the debt in favor of this creditor who has made the notice, who has made an application. Next is the failure to satisfy court decree, which means that if at any point of time a court has made a judgment, the court has passed an order that yes, certain amount has to be paid to the creditor, right? A certain debt is owed to the creditor and that has to be settled. And if the company does not do it, then the court will wind up the company, right? If it is unsatisfied, however the small the amount is, that is irrelevant. If court has passed a decree and that is not being satisfied by the company, then it would be a valid ground for the court to order winding up of the company. And when we talk about court, we would also consider the foreign courts. If the foreign court has given such a judgment, passed such a decree, then the company will have to abide by the same, right? The last one is the satisfaction of the court. If the court is satisfied that yes, they are unable to pay the debt and they need to be wound up, they will be wound up. And when will a court be satisfied? If it is proved that they are not being able to pay their debts, right? And for this instance, the court will also pay attention, right, to the contingent and the prospective liability, because if you're not able to pay the current debt, you are not able to pay the upcoming liabilities or as well, right? Which would mean that the company is incapable of paying its debt. So over here, the solvency or insolvency of the company is not coming into play. The only thing is that they're not paying their debts, right? So these were the three grounds. So what we have seen over here, that is that in spite of the demand raised by the creditor, the company is not paying its debt. So that would lead to its inability. But if you think, then there can also be a situation that it is disputed, They don't mean to pay because that is not legible. Right? So how will the court know? So once the court orders for winding up, or the court is planning or intending to wind up, then the company will have to prove that the payment is disputed. They will have to give valid evidences to prove the same. Right? And then if the court is satisfied that yes, it is disputed and it will be paid once the dispute is resolved, then the court will not order winding up. Right? It is on the court to understand, it is on the company to prove. Right? But as a discretion, the court may still ask the company to furnish certain liabilities, certain securities to the creditors. Right? And the court can also at some point of time refuse the winding up and give some more time to the company to pay off its debt, because the court, as I said, does not always want the company to be wound up. They want the company to sustain, so they are trying to help the company. But if it is not in a position to be helped as well, then they would want to help the creditors and the people who owe or who are owed by the company. Right? Then we have the last ground, that is just and equitable to wind up the company. Now what do you mean by just and equitable ground to wind up the company? When we talk about just and equitable ground, what is just and equitable ground for winding up the company? So if a petitioner has filed a petition to the court, right, then they will have to prove to the court that yes, this is a just and reasonable ground and we don't have any other remedy available. Right? Since they are not able to pay the debt and there is no remedy available for that, they will have to be wound up. That would be constituted to be a just and equitable ground. Just and equitable means that this is the last resort. Winding up is the last resort. There is no alternative available for that. Right? But the court may also set aside this winding up order if it feels that okay, the ground that the petitioner has put forward, right, can be tackled via some other means. That means there is a remedy, alternate remedy for the case. Right? Or if it considers that the petitioner is acting unreasonable, it is not such a big issue, right? And so the court would say that no, it's not just and equitable, although you have filed a petition. So at that point of time, the court can also withdraw from the winding up order. Right? And for this, the court will not only see the interest of the shareholders and the creditors. They are not the only people impacted by the company. The public at large is also impacted by the company. So the court will take a decision keeping in mind the public interest as well, along with the interest of the shareholders and the creditors. Right? Now there are certain examples of just and equitable ground that we'll cover in the next lecture. Right? So we would just take the examples, but I would explain it to you in the upcoming lecture. So the examples of just and equitable ground would be the loss of substratum, the deadlock in management, the fraudulent or illegal business, company is a bubble, or recommendation by BIFR. BIFR is the Board of Industrial and Financial Reconstruction. So if it recommends, it would be wound up. So we would explain these 5 terms in the next lecture, and then we would move ahead with the questions based on section 433. Right? So I hope this lecture was useful to you and section 433 is clear. Right? So in the next class also we'll start with the revision of this lecture. So over there, in short, you will get to grasp everything, and then we'll move out to the questions that have been asked in your previous examinations and also the questions that are given in your practice manuals. Right? So please stay tuned for that. Until then, this is Abhinay Gupta signing off. Thank you. Bye-bye.